Hello, and welcome to What Sex Got to Do with It? We're here with Heather Remoff, my favorite 84-year-old great grandmother in all the United States.
Wow.
And so we're still at 84, right?
Oh yes. Oh
Okay, all
yeah.
right.
Don't. But
So,
of course that means I'm in my 85th year. You do know
yeah, I
that.
understand. I
So,
understand. I've just been
yeah,
saying
yeah.
80,
No,
84
no,
for a little
no,
while.
no.
So,
It's
so
gonna stay that
It's
way
good.
till
It's
yeah,
good.
for a little bit.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. So the name of this chapter is First Words: The Evolution of Language. I I think I have a good sense of where this title came from, but
Oh,
we
give
but
me give me your sense of it, Len.
oh no.
Okay.
I'm asking you questions
Okay.
here.
Well,
So,
you know, that's sort of an expression I hear. I
yeah,
think it probably has biblical origins. You
yeah,
know, in the beginning there was the word. I'm not a church person,
yeah.
but I and other books on the evolution of language, we use that expression, first words. I think there was actually a book that was a collection of essays on the evolution of language that might have been called First Words. But I so much believe that Homo sapiens starts with language.
Gotcha.
And so understanding the origin
Yeah.
of, of language
Right.
is such an. So
Right.
is that what you were thinking of? Tell me.
Well, I guess having read all of it, it just made sense that what you were thinking is that humans, the language was what really separated us, and so the only reason I didn't want to answer the question, which you got me to do, anyways, is that I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this,
Okay, no, that's cool.
because this chapter is just so full of
Okay.
questions, and I'm just gonna have the hardest time keeping everything, to 28 minutes and 10 seconds, But I will start with some reading the confession in one of the early paragraphs, and you start with, "Okay, I confess that recall of my interviews with women has influenced my speculative account of the origin of our species. I find it impossible to put out of my mind that one woman told me regarding her decision to have sex for the first time with the man she later married, he gave me a bite of his peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and the next thing I knew, we were in bed." Was that literal? Was it
Oh, that,
literally a peanut butter and jelly
yes.
sandwich?
Oh, literally a peanut butter and jelly
Was it
sandwich. Just, and
so?
but the fact that I think he may have made the peanut butter and jelly. It was his peanut butter jelly sandwich, and he gave her a bite of it. He literally fed her, and so that and the reason that I recalled that is that I was imagining my hypothetical Garden of Eden, where suddenly we have this. I think it was in that chapter where suddenly there's this what I call prototype one, this little baby that's been born with 23 chromosome pairs.
Yeah.
And I began to imagine what would happen to that prototype one as the child grew and demonstrated various skills that would emerge as the child reached maturity. And I think that's why, because I was imagining, oh, he's smashing a nut with a rock that other primates can't do, and then he's feeding one of the females that's watching. And then I think I recall at that point I went to, oops, maybe I'm taking this story too far. I can't help but remember, but I envisioned the courtship feeding as being
Yeah.
an early innovation
Yeah,
in
no.
humans.
I was just wondering if maybe
Yeah.
that
But
was.
that's a true, no,
Yeah.
that was a genuine quote from one of the women I
Yeah.
interviewed. Yep.
No, I love it. I love it. That's great. It makes me you know, me. It, I sometimes go through these phases where I eat a certain food a lot for a while until I'm just tired of it. So now I feel like PBJ's kind of back in my near future, but then my whole deal is that I have to be careful at giving someone some of my PBJ because I don't know if I'm sending like the wrong
Yeah,
signal.
you have to watch.
Yeah. So I think we touched on this in some of the earlier segments, but I am still kind of fascinated by this whole notion of the one of a kind, you know, variant, the naked ape, as you call the individual. how it's able to reproduce. Because earlier on you said, well, there might be the situation where we have multiple or more individuals are undergoing these fusions, on chromosome
Right.
2, so it's not happening just in one place, it's happening, anything that's causing that. But it seems like the frequency would still have to be fairly low.
Oh, I think it probably was low.
Yeah,
Um, Len, there's so much we don't know,
yeah,
in part because we're locked in
right,
to what you and I were talking earlier
right,
about the early Darwinian
right,
notion of natural selection, which I do believe needs to be updated. But like, for example, the what used to be called dark and RNA, I think it's now called non-coding
yeah,
RNA.
yeah,
A lot of that may be viral in origin.
right,
So, we don't know. When we were infected with viruses, just look at how COVID-19 has impacted so many different body parts.
right,
I mean, people get all kinds of reactions
right,
from having been infected with that particular virus. I think it's even possible that there could have been a viral infection that swept through that might have made the telomeres
right,
weak and
right,
made those kinds of fusions more likely. We don't know,
yeah,
but I don't think it would be a one-off. I think there would,
right,
and just like the Neanderthal and the Denisovans, they also have 23 chromosome
right,
pairs.
right.
So that was going on.
Yeah, I guess what I'm driving at though is that would that disruption be so large, that that kind of individual could only mate and have viable offspring, with another individual that had similar mutations.
I suspect that that is the case,
Yeah,
Len.
which makes it so much harder for for it to get going, because now you just have two individuals,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have the kind of like the inbreeding.
But we don't know that it was only two. I mean because as I said, there could have been, solar flares. There could have been a whole lot of things that might have challenged
Right,
the stability of our
Right.
genomes.
right,
And as I mentioned, I think in an earlier chapter, I don't think all chromosomes are created
Right.
equal. Some are more
Right.
vulnerable
right,
to those kinds of copying errors
right, right.
and non-disjunction
Yeah.
and so forth. So I think it's possible, but again, that's speculative.
Right.
I'd like to get other people thinking about
Yeah,
this.
and that's
I
the-
need more ideas.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you do say that it's speculative, and sometimes to me, I'm just kind of interested in the details, and I did not like look at the footnotes closely and then go to the sources in order, because that's not the point really
No.
of this book, and as we're slowly getting towards the latter chapters where the whole reason for this book is going to become really apparent, and so as I said earlier, it's a nice little mystery, to me, and so I take it for that. But also along the way, though, we get to explore some topics, and so one is where you mentioned the difference between language and communication. Can you tell me?
Yes, and I think all species, plant and animal, have communication. And the person who alerted me to the difference between language and communication is the late linguist Derek Bickerton.
Yeah.
And for him, for it to be true language, it has to show displacement. And he
Right.
uses the word displacement differently than another linguist, Noam Chomsky, does. But for Derek Bickerton, displacement in what characterizes language, and that is the ability to describe something that you can't see or point to, something in the past or something in the future, something that's not immediately there.
Right.
Where he felt that communication is just about things that are immediately there. And it was so interesting to me. He started by saying we need to look at what humans do differently from other primates to get an idea of where that symbolic ability came from, the ability to imagine a past
Right.
and to picture a future, to talk about things that happened over a hill that we can't see.
Right.
And so he started, let's look at the difference between humans and non-human primates. But then he very quickly veered away from that and started looking at what I call haplodiploid
Yeah, right,
species,
right.
and where like honeybees communicate and
right.
so forth. But really, the difference that makes a difference is the difference between humans and non-human primates. And in fact, language is symbolic communication.
Right.
Of all the trillions of species that have ever evolved in the billions of years of life on this planet, only one species has evolved symbolic communication that I know of, that I've ever heard of, and that's humans. So that is the source of our exceptionalism. Language is the source of our exceptionalism. And that's what makes us different. Then that's what enables us to communicate with other members of our species who've been dead for generations. I can talk to Darwin. I mean, I can read what he said.
Right.
It's what enables me to communicate with someone on the other side of the world.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
And so language just makes us, that is the source of our exceptionalism.
Yeah.
But I say that it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. I was trying to understand, though, the difference between language and communication.
Yeah, but that's the difference, the displacement.
Right.
And, he was, I forget, one of the examples he gave was, buzzards circling over a kill. But to me, you can point at that in gesture, but that's not the same as the true displacement, where you can talk about, when I was out this morning, I saw there was a dead woolly mammoth on the other side of that hill, and let's go try to harvest some meat from that. Talking about something that you can't see.
Right, right. Because and you say that when he talks about he uses ants and bees communicating about something else, like it's out of sight, as an instance of them using displacement. I think his whole point is that maybe displacement isn't the difference between language and communication. And you say that, well, essentially, because they're haplodiploid, they are essentially.
It's almost like one individual.
But I was thinking, well, yes, we're diploid, but we're so closely related. The genetics between one individual and another.
Humans,
just aren't that great.
It's not that great at all.
Yeah, and then we have the pheromones. And so I was thinking, well, maybe he's onto something. Maybe it is something other than the displacement that really, is the difference between language and communication.
To me, language is symbolic communication,
Right.
and it's that ability to symbolize, to communicate with symbols, that really does set us apart from all other species. To me, it explains everything.
Right.
I mean, it really does explain how we're so different, and it's much of what makes us wonderful, Len.
Right.
And it's also, it's got a downside that's not so great.
And we'll definitely get into that.
Yeah.
So one of the things you talk about is, or you write about is the olfactory receptors that are found on the skin.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. And so it makes me wonder now, do you know if other primates have that also? The ones that precede us in the evolutionary tree before that?
I don't know that.
Because that would be interesting, because you kind of indicate that maybe that is something, that
I've only heard of it in relation to humans, and that's a fairly new, I think, discovery in relation to humans, that we have olfactory receptors in our skin.
Yeah.
And that to me is fascinating, because to me that's pheromonal communication, is those olfactory.
Yeah.
And I know in the book I make a point about we lie with language. Language enables us to lie. That's one of the downsides to ourselves and to others, but pheromones tell the truth. And I think that's one reason why touch is such an important component of human courtship.
Do you know if there are taste receptors also in the skin?
I'm not aware of that.
I was just wondering.
No, because smell and taste are so closely related. That of course, you can taste skin. I mean, skin tastes differently, but that's your tongue that's doing the reception. That I don't know about. But and I think the fact, as I'd explained in an earlier chapter, whenever there's a major genetic change, like a chromosomal shift, a whole lot of things change that aren't necessarily adaptive, but they're not necessarily maladaptive either. They just come along for the ride. And certainly, we've been described as the hairless ape
Right.
or the naked ape. I think there was a book, was it Desmond
Yeah.
Morris that wrote it? Was
I forget
his
who
book?
wrote it. Yeah.
The Naked Ape.
Right.
But, the fact that we don't have much hair on our skin and then suddenly they're olfactory
Yeah.
receptors in the skin. Touch is a very important part of human courtship.
Right.
A very important part. And I think we're reading people's signals and maybe getting a better sense through the messages they're sending via pheromone than we might be through what they're saying. I mean,
Right. I hear you, and yeah, it is fascinating.
I'm just so curious about all of those things. See, in the preface of this book, I asked my imagined reader to read it with an open mind, to forget everything they think they know. Read it with an open mind. You've been really good at doing that, by the way. Read it with an open mind and be thinking about your own theories.
Right.
Don't accept my ideas as the last word, because that's what humans are good at.
Right.
I want ideas from other people. That's how we build reliable theories, is by incorporating a lot of different ideas.
Right.
And so I really love it when something I write makes someone go,
Yeah.
I wonder if that can possibly be true. How would that work? Those are the questions that just I find to be so much fun.
And I'm having one of those moments now, and I'm kind of darting about really rapidly because we're limiting these chapters to 30 minutes, 28 minutes. And this one just had so much to me, so I'm not like really going on.
We just have to touch on things.
But there's one point where you talk about cultural evolution, and you say that it proceeds much more rapidly than the brain evolves. And I'm wondering, is it really cultural evolution, or is it just kind of cultural fashion?
Well, I think it's probably cultural fashion. And I think maybe maybe I was referencing something that Derek Bickert, or not, that Terrence Deacon had written in his wonderful book. I think it was The Symbolic Species, the Coevolution of Language and the Brain. And in his book, when I read it, he was talking about cultural evolution of language, like how new languages develop, how quickly that happens compared to how slowly the brain evolves. But there I part company with one of the people I most admire is Derek Bickert. And that I think the change in our brain, because I'm such a fan of this theory of it happening at the moment of the chromosomal fusion, I think the change in our brain, the ability of our brain to process symbolic communication, probably that ability was probably pretty abrupt and pretty fast. So I think that was evolution happening fast.
Right.
But then, of course, we had to build on it.
Right.
And so, I part company with one of my heroes a little bit, but he knows much more about neurology than I do.
Right.
So that's his field.
So then you don't feel as if we are outpacing our brain ability.
Culturally.
Yeah. Well, just as a species, like our language and what we have created as a result of our language has outpaced our brain's ability to deal with the.
Actually, I think a little bit we have, and where I would go to an example of that would be the digital revolution has happened so fast, and it's amplified what I considered our species-specific traits, things that are basic to us, but digital media amplifies it in a way that it exaggerates it. And I think in that sense, we've gotten into a little bit of trouble where our cultural evolution, this skill with technology that we have, has gone so fast that our brain hasn't caught up necessarily, and in some ways it can be harmful to us.
But caught up to what?
I think it disturbs our sense of peace. Like we hear so much about young people on their screens all the time, and the rise in the level of their stress and anxiety as a result of the amount of screen time they spend, and I think that has been documented,
Right.
that the two are correlated. So the things that have made us comfortable as humans,
Right.
our technology, that's our cultural evolution, has speeded that up in such a way as to cause some disruption in
Well,
our
technology speeded up, not evolution, right?
Yeah, but that's the I'm calling
The
that's
cultural,
the cultural evolution.
I got you.
Has speeded up in a way
Right.
that our biological,
Right.
our biologically social selves are not totally adapted to.
Right.
You know, are not
Right.
certainly. For myself, that's very true. I'm a publisher's nightmare in that I do no social media.
Right. So what I find though, when people are doing screen time, they're normally communicating with other people. I mean, it's not generally that people are like doing screen time and only focus on themselves. Maybe that's the wrong way of saying it. That they are in isolation. I mean,
Oh, that's true.
in fact, a lot of the gamers, are playing like these interactive games with other people. I mean, so I see it now as can our species handle being as connected as we are and increasing all these other connections. I mean, and as you know, as you get more and more connections, I mean, then the range of responses that you get increases, but also the probability that you're going to get a negative response goes up. I mean, and generally, I mean, it's like people can handle the positive responses, but the negative ones are what do them harm. And I think just as a species, we're wired up to, react more strongly to the negative input than the positive input. But the more connected you are, the more likely you are to get that negative input. And so is it? I think maybe where the argument for support is that maybe we just can't handle as much connectedness as our technology has given us.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll take a while for us to evolve to that. Maybe we can't. Maybe it's just too much. And maybe we have to figure out a way to decrease the amount of connectedness. And
those are such good questions to discuss. I think those are things we have to talk about.
For your next book.
Well,
Yeah.
you're ambitious for me.
And so I'm going to cut you off just a little bit because I just have one more question. Maybe I can ask it some other time, but right now it's staring me in front of me. Do you think there could have been some other reason for concealed ovulation?
Other than a mutation?
No, not the cause. But you say that concealed ovulation allows for deception. Or because this is because you're talking about truth and lies. In the section. And so what do you think was the evolutionary advantage of having the concealed ovulation?
Gives women more choice. Gives the female much more choice.
You think there could have been any other reason for it?
Well, I think that I believe that was a pretty abrupt.
Yeah.
I don't think that was selected for. I think that happened.
It just happened.
And then,
okay.
And then we used it in a way that benefited us. But I don't think concealed ovulation was selected for. But if it could be, I think it would be a good thing to select for. It gives women much, much, much more control of their reproductive options.
Yeah, I hear you. And I'm just scrolling down because I can't remember if this question, it looks like it's not in, oh, actually, I think it might be, Yeah. So do you think monogamy and marriage preceded language?
Oh, wow. I never actually thought of that. Well, certainly species that don't have language are monogamous.
Yes.
So I don't think the two, I don't think language and monogamy necessarily go together.
But primates, are they generally, or our closely related relatives, are they generally monogamous?
No, I'm actually thinking more of species of birds that are monogamous.
Yeah, I'm thinking about...
Well, I think language helps in pair bonding. I certainly do. And given that I think the capacity for language and the capacity for concealed ovulation came as the result of one mutation.
And the ability also to symbolically create contracts.
Yep.
And so you could consider marriage as like a contract, and a way of saying, I own, I possess. I mean, so I'm just really.
I
So
think that's an interesting one to talk about.
yeah, all right. So yeah, I do like what you say about mathematics is unblemished. I mean, existence is, yeah, I think of as there's something very pure about math.
Mm-hmm.
And when people, ask about reality, I think it ultimately comes down to 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
And from that, everything flows. I mean, so it was kind of refreshing to see that because you were talking about that in the context of lies and how math is kind of like
It, it,
impervious to that.
yeah, I mean, they say you can lie with statistics, but that's not math itself.
Right.
That's us doing something with the results of math. I think the mathematical thing is fascinating to
Yes.
me, the purity of that.
Yes. And so we have about a minute and a half left here, and I'm not going to go anything else because we'll go over time. And I will just say to folks who are listening to this and watching it, you want to read everything up to chapter 8, of course. I mean, before you read chapter 8, but when you get to chapter 8, it's just so full of interesting information. It's not the climax, I mean, but it certainly takes off.
Do you
At
know
8.
how that chapter came to be? I have a close friend in California who's interested in linguistics,
Yeah.
and she was coming to visit me. She said, "Oh, Heather, let's have a salon. We'll invite a bunch of your friends over, and we'll discuss the evolution of language between the lasagna and the cheesecake." And so then I started reading up on the evolution of language prior to Sarah's visit, and that was the origin of this chapter.
Yeah. Well,
Related to food, always, of course.
yes. Well, who knows? Maybe at some point, I mean, there will be an opportunity to come back and visit this chapter because this segment could have been 3 times as long. But, anyways, thank you very much, and we'll be coming back, I mean, for chapter 9, which is called "Can We Rewrite the Script?" And so, thank you, folks.
Thanks, Len.
Yeah, I did.
It is fun.